You're listening to Mornings on the Mall with Brian and Larry. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Brian Wilson, and joining us right now, Senator Dan Coats, Republican of Indiana, for a little while longer. He announced his retirement earlier this year, but he is a member of the Senate Finance Committee and joins us now. Thanks for being here, Mr. Senator.
Good morning.
We yesterday interviewed a reporter from your neighborhood there in Indianapolis, actually, and he uncovered a story. Bob Segal is his name, and he uncovered a story about how the IRS is turning a blind eye to illegal immigrants who are using stolen Social Security numbers. According to the IRS, they say, oh, well, they're just borrowing those Social Security numbers. How is this not identity theft, and how are you, as a senator, allowing the administration to not enforce the law?
Well, those are all very good questions, and thanks to Bob, who uncovered this and then brought it to our attention, we learned that the IRS has identified any kind of fraud or stealing someone's ID, Social Security number, as undocumented aliens in order to protect themselves from. They want to pay their taxes. The employer may have withheld them, but they've stolen someone's identity and used it to put themselves in a better position for hopefully gaining some kind of citizenship or whatever in the future. The amazing thing here is the IRS basically says, oh, they didn't steal it. They just borrowed it, and they borrowed it for a time for this purpose. And by the way, it's not our job to notify the victim here. It's our job just to collect the money. And total disregard for the person whose identity was stolen. And then when they go to file their taxes, IRS says, hey, wait a minute, you're behind. You already got your refund. Oh, that went back to the guy who, quote, borrowed it. So it was
right.
Just ridiculous to define something like this as borrowing. It was stolen.
Well, what can you do as a senator to try to correct this policy?
Well, during a hearing, we had the commissioner of IRS, and I directly described all this, and he was aware of it, but had really no compassion at all for the impact of the victim. We had a person here in Indiana who couldn't get insurance for his family for 6 months because somebody said, you're using a false Social Security number. Somebody else has that number. He said, well, wait a minute, that's my number. It took 6 months to figure this out, so they were without insurance. So what we told the commissioner is this got to be fixed. He said, well, it's not our job. I said, well, it's somebody's job. It's either your job or some other agency if you can't do it. So we basically said, we want to sit down and work this out so you will take care of this, and if you don't, we're going to legislate so that you have to or somebody has to. So we're moving this through the committee, and we're also have a meeting set up maybe as early next week with the commissioner to try to rectify this. Some people are being hurt by what's happening.
Well, I mean, at the very least, shouldn't the people who have their identity stolen be notified? That doesn't seem like it's much more than sending out a letter with a stamp on it.
You know, the IRS tried a partial program on this, a pilot program to do just that, and they decided, no, that's extra work. We're not going to do that anymore, and they dropped that. I mean, this is government that operates by numbers. There's not a personal face. There's not a personal family, a personal story behind each one of these things. There are people becoming victims because someone has stolen their number and stolen their name, and that has to be addressed. And you can't just brush it off by simply saying, oh, that's not what we do here. And no, have you notified anybody else? No. Is anything in place to notify the victim? No. Well, that's just unacceptable.
You know, I got to ask you, Senator, I'm always fascinated by how you do your job and how you sit on these committee hearings with your colleagues from across the aisle and how they're able to defend things like this. Can you just give us some insight? Because I know that the issue of immigration and immigration reform is a challenging one for many up on Capitol Hill. But there are some things that I think most Americans agree on, no matter what their political persuasion. And one of them is that someone in this country illegally, and anyone in this country, should not get away with identity theft. And a government agency involved in collecting taxes, like the IRS, they should be part of the solution, not encouraging the problem. Do you have any Democrats on this committee with you that in some way is defending the current policy? And if so, what is their position? How do they do that?
It was very silent across the aisle in terms of this, but I think everybody got the message, and that is, I don't want to go home and tell people that this is okay. So we're trying to publicize this thing, thanks to Bob, and we're trying to shame the IRS in looking at this from the victim standpoint and not from just simply collecting tax dollars.
Do you find that we've just reached a point where government is so big and so clunky and so badly organized that this is the kind of thing that you see not only at the IRS but largely across the board, where people lose sort of touch with the fact that they are employed by the people, not the other way around?
You know, you've hit the nail right on the head here. These are not bad people working for the government. But this thing is the government is so dysfunctional. It tries to do so much. It's involved in so many things. It's become very impersonalized. And there's no longer thoughts about, well, what about the impact on the taxpayer? What about the impact on the ordinary citizen? It's all done with mass numbers. Clearly, whether it's the IRS or any other agency of the federal government, you find all kinds of dysfunction, but also kind of a no longer connecting with people who are victims of all this. It's not just IRS fraud, but it's mistakes in terms of documenting people. It's the inability to sign up and take care of veterans. I mean, It's just gone and grown beyond what I think is needed and what is responsible leadership in government, and it just continues to grow and grow and grow.
All right. Well, Senator Dan Coats, it is such a pleasure to have you here, and thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll stay on it.
Well, we will stay on it. We'll get a hold of this one. We'll try to make it right, but who knows what's around the next corner.
All right. It's now 8:43.